Welcome to Oradea. Located in the northwest region of Romania, this historic city serves as the gateway to Central and Western Europe. Oradea, along with the equally romantic city of Budapest, which sits in the Midwest region of Hungary, is famous for its palaces and cathedrals. But back in the late 1930s, Oradea was much more than a tourist stop along Hungary's border.
It was a nice city, around almost 100,000 people. It was a lot of Jews, Jewish city, with synagogues and Hebrew schools, Jewish schools, theaters, operas, universities.
Hannah Steiner, the youngest in a Jewish family of 6, consisting of her parents, grandmother, and older sister and brother living in Oradea at the time, where she learned to sew, play the violin, and enjoy the great outdoors.
We didn't have video and we didn't have all the other luxuries. We made our own rag dolls. Sometimes we went mostly to play outside, we were very little when.
As time passed on, Hannah Steiner would join her mother, Helene Abraham, a licensed seamstress, on frequent trips to Bucharest, where she worked in her mother's own embroidery and seamstress shop. But in 1941, amidst Hitler's rapidly spreading Nazi army in Germany and Hungary, Hannah and her mother came home one evening to find more than just their family waiting for them.
And when we heard that, we were on our way going home. By the time we arrived, the Hungarians were in the city already.
Nearly 75 years after Hungary invaded Romania, Hannah Steiner still remembers the Third Reich's impact on Europe's Jews.
We heard that people in Poland and Czechoslovakia, and we saw the Germans coming to Hungary, Jewish people, but still couldn't, that's human nature, you couldn't understand that can happen to you, And then all of a sudden, March 19, I will never forget that they took away her license. And then she had no choice. She went up to Budapest as a worker, to work by somebody. And I went with her to work, and the family remained home.
Upon arriving in Budapest, Hannah and her mother Helen were forced to wear yellow Jewish stars and walk on separate sidewalks. But amidst the confusion and persecution, Hannah ran into her future husband, Abraham, at a Hungarian dance. It wouldn't be long till 15-year-old Hannah knew that she was in love.
And then he took us home and he asked if he can come to see me, and then he came, and when we went somewhere, I went with my mother, a hand to the movies here and there, and he gave me a necklace with a little locket, with a picture and the date.
Hannah and Abraham spent whatever time they had together, somewhat aware that their time was limited. Tragically, later on that year, Hannah would discover that Abraham had been taken to a labor camp. Weeks later, the Hungarian police began to force Jewish families out of their homes.
One day they came to pick up my mother. And I said, I'm her daughter. She said, no, she's not my daughter. She didn't want that they should take me. And I said, yes, I am her daughter. So they took us from our house.
After being forced to leave their home in Budapest, Hannah and her mother Helen were transferred to a nearby brick factory and then to a Jewish seminary. While Hannah suffered for weeks, constantly washing clothes for the Hungarian police, it was her mother's hopeful words that carried her through each day.
I shouldn't worry, everything's gonna be okay. That was her refrain, always she said that. And we were relieved when the train came and they took us in the train.
Hannah and her mother were transported out of Budapest in cattle cars, along with hundreds of other Jewish families, to the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Relief that we can have some fresh air. But we saw some flames, and we didn't realize that those were the crematoriums. And the Germans stood there, and Mengele stood there, and said left and right, left and right. Later, when we went in, we asked, and then those who are there already from Poland before, the Jewish people said, you see, there are your parents or grandparents burning in the crematorium. Told us to undress completely. And those young German boys, the 19, 20-year-old boys, just looked at the young girls. I mean, we were young. And they shaved us all over.
Hannah and Helen would later find their cousin in Auschwitz and learn that their entire family, except for Hannah's brother who'd fled to Brazil, had been taken to Auschwitz and sent to the crematorium. With most of the family gone and living conditions continuing to worsen, Hannah and her mother did everything they could to survive and save their sanity.
We were cooking verbally. We cooked that. We cooked. We said, "This, my mother did this, and you add this, and you did this." That was we were cooking the whole day.
6 months later, after suffering through long days and nights without food, no access to clean water, and sleeping on lice-ridden mattresses, they were transferred to a nearby labor camp, and then finally to Bergen-Belsen near the end of the war. On April 15th, 1945, British and English forces came in and liberated the camp. But unfortunately for Helen, it was still too late.
When we were liberated, my mother was already in very bad shape. She had typhus, and she had a wound on her head, and that was full with lice. She said that you're gonna go home, and you're gonna meet your brother, but you're never gonna see. I'm not going home, and you don't gonna see your sister. She told me that. I said, don't say such a stupid thing, And she died 2 weeks after liberation. Two weeks. My mother encouraged me, and she told me stories, and she started to tell me when she knew my father and when they got married, and just to make me laugh, always. She was the strong one, and she died.
Hannah, along with the others in Bergen-Belsen, was free from the horrors of the concentration camps. But without her mother, she continued to live in fear. Only weighing 62 pounds after liberation, Hannah spiraled into illness and contracted a high fever. She'd soon be transported by ship to a hospital in a port city in Sweden. Once she recovered, Hannah spent the next 5 years working in a local sewing factory. Hannah finally found hope when a coworker informed her that her brother was still alive, along with her long-lost fiancé.
And a girl, I didn't know her, and we were talking about boyfriend, so she said, "Oh, he is in Israel." That my husband is in Israel. I said, "How do you know?" He has a cousin in Sweden, and she said that he is in Israel. Called up the cousin, and she said, "I'm going to Israel, but I don't know nothing. If I know something, I'll let you know." Came an Israeli sailor, came to Göteborg. I worked in a factory, the same factory, and I told him the story. So he said, "Don't worry, I write a letter in English and in Hebrew with the Jerusalem Post, and if he's alive and he's there, he will let you know." So he wrote a letter, and I threw it in. And after I came home from work one day, and I see they had a slit on the door, and I find a letter, and I recognize his handwriting.
Upon finding out Abraham was alive in Israel, Hannah Steiner took a plane to France and then boarded a ship to Israel, where she reunited with her lover at last.
I went with my friend, so in the car he says, "I don't know what you think, but I don't think that I didn't see you for 7 years. I think I didn't see you for 2 weeks."
Hannah still has the postcard she received in Budapest. Translated from Hungarian, it means, "My heart races back to you." Sparing no time to get married, they said their vows in a hotel room and have stayed by each other's side until Abraham passed away.
This when I arrived in Israel, and I arrived the day of the Yom Ha'atzmaut. And I went with this girl who is next to me, you know. We went together, and this is my husband I met the first time. Isn't that something?
The promise of the postcard she received in Budapest had come true, and more romantic moments were to follow.
And what do you remember?
I remember exactly. He wrote it in the hospital, Hadassah in Tel Aviv. You see, this is not so bad, right?
Hannah would meet up with her brother Julio in Brazil, and then migrate to the United States with her husband in 1961. They lived in Brooklyn, New York, for almost 40 years until they moved to Staten Island in 2000, where Hannah still currently lives. She is the mother of 3 children, Michael, Jacob, and Helene, 7 well-educated grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, and continues to contribute to several Staten Island Jewish committees. Although it's difficult for her to recall all the suffering she experienced in the Holocaust, Hannah stays committed to telling her story to the new generation so that they may never forget.
I feel it every single minute of my life. The pictures are turning around in my head. They don't go away. Even if you can go in a theater and watch a show, the picture is still in your head.